Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. I hope this is not your first session, but if it is, please stick around for a few more because there is a lot of great content happening and being delivered for the next hours. So just benefit from it because it's free. So my session is Master SPFx Library Components. And my name is Joel Rodrigues. And hope you stick with me for the next 50 minutes. Before we start, just a quick shout out. The SharePoint conference is now the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference happening in March next year in Las Vegas. So have a look, consider your options there, potentially go. And another one, special shout out to all the sponsors. They make these events possible. Definitely the size of the events benefit from the sponsors. So let me introduce myself. My name is Joel Rodrigues. I'm a senior SharePoint developer at Storm Technology, a company based in Dublin. I've fairly recently been awarded Microsoft MVP last year. And I have more than 10 years of experience with custom SharePoint solutions. You can connect with me on Twitter, more than welcome to do that. My hashtag is Joel Rodrigues, or follow my blog, or both, m365-dev.com. So today I will cover the traditional SPFx development scenarios, which problems that we had with that or limitations, a library component, how that aims to solve those problems. Then I will show you a quick demo of a relatively basic way to keep development on in parallel. Then I will show you another version, much improved version of that with a demo, and then I will have a special surprise to make that even more powerful with another demo, and then at the end some conclusions and resources. So let's get started. I have quite a few things to show, so hopefully things go smoothly and I don't waste too much time here. So if you joined the community calls in SharePoint development, you probably have seen this diagram because I got it from there. Traditional SharePoint development is something based on a SharePoint solution, SharePoint Framework solution at the moment for current modern sites, which pack all your assets inside. And that solution can be deployed to the tenant app catalog, like traditional SharePoint solutions. But if you have SharePoint, if you have the Office 365 public CDN enabled, that can serve your solution much faster. So when you deploy your solution, the content of the solution, so the assets are deployed to an hidden document library inside the app catalog. If the public CDN is enabled, those resources are copied to the CDN and served from there, all happening behind the scenes without having to worry about that. If not, then they will be served directly from the tenant app catalog site from the library, which means that it will be fairly slower than when compared to the CDN. So to produce those solutions, there are two common cases. You have your SPFx solution, and with that solution, you have many JavaScript libraries, things like React or Angular, Office UI Fabric, jQuery, you name it. Then you have all your custom components, all your custom code, classes, services, everything there. And then inside that, you have one or many web parts, one or many extensions, and you bundle all that. And often you have a massive package, or you try to split it into smaller packages. The other case is have, again, an SPFx solution, and then you have a web part solution with many JavaScript libraries, many custom components, and you have another extension, separate solution, separate package, which has many document libraries, many JavaScript libraries. It could be the case that some are actually the same, but because you are developing distinct solutions, keeping them separate, it's just another copy of the same library. And you have, again, your custom code, which in some cases could even be some of the code you add there. So as you can see, this presents some challenges, which we are going to compare here. And I have only some of common ones. Certainly, you would be able to identify more if you try to explore those development processes. But for case one, so when we add a single repository, is maintainability. Every time you touch something, you are editing a repository as it entirely, and that can introduce bugs. So you should have tests as much as you can. And there is dependencies. TypeScript does help you with that, but there is always dependencies that you may be missing between the components, and you can potentially introduce errors. Performance, as SPFx solutions grow, you will see a massive hit in the performance when you build or bundle the solution. The worst I've seen goes into a few minutes, and that's not a great experience for developers and drastically impacts performance of your development team. Often this also results in a single deployment package, so makes it very hard to maintain, because if you want to fix a bug, even a little thing in one of the components, you deploy the whole thing, and that's not an optimal experience, because you could potentially introduce bugs on something you haven't even touched. And as I mentioned, that implies an higher risk update just because of the dependency between all the moving parts. On the second case, where we had isolated solutions, so we now get a little bit more separation between them. But with that, you also have the problem that each solution is maintained individually, so it will cost you more time. So for example, if I want to update the version of React or a version of a library in all the solutions, for example, I could be using one of the libraries from a CDN, then I will need to go through all the libraries and update that to try to minimize versioning problems and so on. It's also harder to share code between them. So if they are fully isolated, you have the challenge of having to potentially duplicate code between the solutions if they are fully isolated. You may have different components which, for example, display some of the data in common. Let's say personal data, for example, from the user profile. It can be surfaced in different places, and those two different components will have, for example, the same code to go and get that data, as an example, which also not optimal, of course. And as I mentioned, you have the challenge of having to update all the solutions separately. So for example, if you want to run the latest version of SPFx in all of them, if we have a new release, you will have to go through to each one of them and update everything. But so the common challenge here is an easy way to make the solutions easy to split and still be able to share the code. And so for that, we now have, for quite a while now, we have library components, which was the last type of solution released for SharePoint Framework after web parts and extensions. And that is basically a component or a solution that sits outside and is then consumed, not outside because it's loaded on the page, but is not surfaced on the UI, like the other components can be, but is then consumed by the other components. In this case, we have a diagram here. We have a client-side web part on the left, another one on the right. The shape is different just to show you get the idea that they are completely distinct web parts, and they both could be consuming our library component. The library component can have some resources for one, some resources for the other, or some resources that are shared by both. You also get the benefit that by extracting the logic to the library component, if you have, for example, multiple web parts in the page, they all load you only get one single instance of the library component that is then shared by all the web parts. That, of course, has a lot of performance benefits, especially if your solution is quite big and the web parts require a lot of dependencies to execute. And you have, of course, the benefit of the CDN. You can simply upload the library component to your app catalog. If you have CDN enabled, it will be immediately served from a CDN, which is controlled by you in some way. So you don't have to worry about consuming, if you have limitations, for example, on consuming external CDNs from other providers, that may be, for example, a company policy, then that may be solved by this, because but to the last extent, that's you controlling the CDN. Of course, you can still create the CDN yourself separately and create your own packages and place them there and consume on your solutions as external packages. So the SharePoint library components don't solve a problem that could not be solved before. They just make it easier, significantly easier, and less complex. There will be people who may have done this before with their own CDN hosting. For example, you could do it with Azure, but that implies you have to take care of that. In some big companies, that, even though it may sound like a very simple process, it turns into a very complex process that needs to go through multiple teams to get approval and decide who maintains what. It's just the library components just make everything simpler. And now I'll show you a very quick demo here. So I'll just share my screen. So that one. So I have here second. So I have here a demo folder, and I'm going to show you the creation of two libraries. Sorry, the two solutions, one library component, one sample web part, and the web part will connect and consume the library. This example will be done using npm link. You could do something similar with npm install and then reference the package using a path. There are pros and cons. So I'll just show you this scenario, which is a common scenario and probably the easiest to get started with. And after that, on following demos, I will show you different approaches, which in my opinion are significantly better. So I will use the same folder structure on my demos so you get a better understanding. So I'll create so I have a demo one folder here, and I will create a folder called libraries and another folder at the same level called solutions. And this means that I could have multiple libraries inside that folder, multiple solutions inside that one. So multiple web parts, all separated, for example, or in the same solution, or extensions. So let's go here, and I will open now. Just get some room. So, and on the libraries, I will just scaffold a sample solution here. Do it. I will just skip through the steps. This is the only thing that matters at this point. I will specify it as a library component, and doesn't really matter for me. So I'll just give it a name. So, and now I will open a new tab. And this time I will go again to the same folder. Oh, it's my bad. Yeah, I got there. And now I'll just call it web part. So all I did was create a web part folder. Now I will scaffold a web part solution. I will select no JavaScript, so it's a little bit faster. And if we now wait just a little bit, so this will install in a moment. So my library component is installed. And actually, here I created it at the root of the libraries folder. I could have created another subfolder. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to use one. But you could just, at this point, because we're using npm link, it doesn't really matter. We could use, we can just use that folder. So in this solution, I will just go and do npm link. That creates a reference to this package. So basically creates npm package globally that points to this folder. Now on my web part, which already completed the build process, if I just go and do, just making sure everything is working. Okay, and now I do npm link, and I needed the solution, the name. I forgot what name I gave to it. So if I just go on the library project, I'll just move things around a little bit. So if I just go to the package, JSON, and that was library demo 1. So if on the web part, I need to do npm link and then the library I'm linking to. And this basically creates a symlink, which is pretty much a shortcut to that. So we created a shortcut to that folder as a global module, and now I'm consuming it as I would to like any other module installed globally on my solution. So from here, I can then go and try to run, just copying a command here, being a bit lazy to install. So I can hit run on my library. I will just run gulp serve. And one thing I need to do as well is on my library solution, I need to go to the config folder, serve, and then I will just set the port to be something slightly different. It doesn't really matter. We're not using the port on the library, but just so we don't see errors later on. And on my project, I can just do the same. So this is the web part solution. Okay, so both are working, and actually before I do that, let me just open both in Visual Studio Code and serve it again. Okay, if I now go to my workbench, see my Hello World web part. And if I go to the web part project, we can, for example, go here and we'll quickly show you what we have on the library. So when you create a library, you will come as a default project with a name method there, which just returns the name of the library. And we can do something like, oops. And I need to import it. And my package name was, sorry, I forgot the name again. And here we have our library, so we can create an instance, and then we can even do something like name equals dot, and we have the method that we have on our library. We can just invoke it, and for example, we can show that name where we now have the description. So an example, if we now hit refresh, we now have the library name there. So and that's a way to develop. It's a simple setup, but we'll let you get started. It does have some common issues you need to be aware. For example, if I now go to my web part and install a package, it will probably remove the npm link to the library, and I will have to keep doing it again every time I install a package. So just some things to be aware, but that is enough to get you going without major problems if you are aware of the small limitations. So let me now close that. And go back to my slides. And the next thing I want to show you is a similar setup, but using Lerna. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. So taken from their website is a tool for managing JavaScript projects with multiple packages. What that means is it's a tool for managing NPM or projects with lots of NPM packages and lots of projects. And it takes care of the whole dirty work, sort of say, for you. And so let me show you how this can benefit you. I will create a new setup here, so completely separate demo here. And I will create the same folder structure. And here, make sure I create a folder. To library. And here I can just call it web part. Doesn't really matter. And now I'm going to do same thing here. To libraries. So I'm on my library, and this time the only difference is I'm going to create my library component solution, but I'm not going to install any packages. I could, but there is no point because Lerna will take care of that for us. So I will just stick with the defaults here and create a library. And something. Okay, and now I'll go back again. I'm still on the other one. Okay, I'm now in my web part folder, and if I do the same thing again, just rush through and no JavaScript framework, and we have our solutions created. So what we need now is, this time I will just open both the same VS Code, so we have a better understanding of what's happening. Where am I? Demo 2, okay. And this time we have libraries and solutions. So I'm going to my library. I get the library name from here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference that library as a dependency. And the version, if I'm not wrong, was 001. And that's the dependency done between my web part and my library. What we now need is to let Lerna handle things for us. So in advance, I installed Lerna globally, which you can do simply by running npm install -g Lerna. And the first command we need to do here is Lerna init. So that created a few things for us, including this JSON file, which Lerna uses to scan the places where it needs to get. It's basically those are the directories where Lerna will look for solutions to manage. So in our case, we don't have packages, we have libraries, and we have solutions. So this means that if I add more libraries there, I don't need to come here and update the references because we have the star at the end, and the same for solutions. I can carry on adding more solutions in the future without having to keep the configuration in sync with that. You will just pick it up. The next thing we need is to run Lerna Bootstrap. What this does is installs all the dependencies in all projects that Lerna can detect. In this case, we can see here is detected 2 packages, which is our library and our web part. Is adding all the dependencies and is also taking care of the dependency between them. So the reference I created here on the package JSON oh, sorry, there you go. So that reference I added there Lerna will make sure that both solutions are connected. Okay, so this is done. I can now go and play with my solutions. If I run Lerna run build, I will still see an error because of the ports. So let's go to config on the library and let's change this to something. That doesn't really matter. If I'll just make sure you use a port that is not used. And now what Lerna can do for you is you can run commands that basically run npm scripts. and it will run it on every project that learner can detect. That also has that command, that script. So if we go to, and by npm scripts, I mean the ones that you have on the package.json file. So new solutions come with 3 scripts, unless you use the PNP generator, which will have more. So for example, we are going to try the build command, and we can run learner run build, and you will see you will run in 2 different packages. And it's done for you. So we can see it's seated on the library and web part. You can also run scripts or against projects in parallel. So if you have many projects, and I will show you a quick at the end a situation where this is handy. You can run in parallel across all of them. So it only makes it a little bit harder to see what is going on because everything just gets mixed. What we can now do with Learn as well is trying to benefit a little bit from the fact that we can target all the projects at the same time. So depending on how you plan things, you may spend more time working on a project than the other at the same time, and you may not have the need to do parallel development. The experience I had, that was often my case, and this was very handy for me. So the possibility of running commands across multiple projects was definitely a massive advantage in my case. What we can also do is we can simply extend the scripts we have here and do things like serve, for example, or ship, which is another common scenario. If we now go to the other package JSON for the library, and we add, so I'll show you first. Oops, wrong one. If I only add the serve command to one of them, you'll see that he only found one package with the run, and he's only going to run on that one. So if we add unload, and because we updated the port on the library to be something different, we can do something like that. Actually, let me do it in parallel. It's a bit faster, and you will see both projects have done and completed. We can come to our workbench. And we have our web part. We can then go and make changes to our library, for example. And as I saved that, this is probably too late now, but it has recompiled. So let me go to my web part here and do something similar like before. So, and like import that. So I'm going to import the library here, which I forgot the name. And we can do in. I'm just going to do the same scenario I did before. So it has recompiled, and we can now see that we have the applet 1, or we can even come here. Oops. And there you go. Oops, we have our custom string there. In the same way, I can just come here and instead of serve, I can, for example, generate the package for all the solutions that depend on the libraries. And I have an error. Okay, 1 second. Oops, I keep pressing the wrong one. Okay, I'm not really sure why it's complaining there. I probably did some typo somewhere. But with a single command, you can invoke a script to, for example, package everything or do something else, some automated task you might need across every single solution. And that is quite handy. Now we only have 2 projects, but if we had 3, you could have a similar scenario. And as the projects grow, the more benefit you get from this. If I now go to the slides, just so the demo. So this is just a sample setup I recently did for a project, for a client project. So I had a library component where I had many custom components or built with React. Some of them were using components, for example, from PNP, reusable controls, and things like that, or Office UI Fabric. But I also had cases where the web part itself, even though most of the logic was abstracted to reusable components, some of the web parts are small requirements. For example, the placeholder control on a web part to require or display when it's configured, for example. So what I did was I added all the dependencies to my library component and then served everything from there to my solutions, which means that everything is shared between the solutions, and I only wrap things up once. I don't bundle my web parts or extensions with external dependencies. They all come from, well, all the ones that are used by my code, not the first-party ones, are bundled in this project and served from here and shared between them. So this was just how I structured. You don't need to do it in the same way. I had here was common resources between them, and then I exported everything inside those folders and consumed on the other side. So this will work the same way. So for example, if you have a list picker in this case, instead of installing it in your consuming solution like you do from PNP, you will import the same things, but import from the library itself. The end result was all the web parts and extensions were very, very, very small. You can also do something like synchronous imports from the library if you want. I didn't do that at that point, but that's another option if you want to try to keep your bundles smaller and split them and only import specific parts when you need them. Just being careful that for that, I modified my library component config and set the entry point as this index TS file instead of the library component TS file itself. Just a small tweak I did there, so I pointed it out. But as you can see, I have a solutions folder, so I have a similar setup like the one I'm doing here. And in this particular case, I think I added 8 or 10 consuming solutions to the library. And Lerna made things really, really simple, as it's so simple to install and manage. So the other thing I wanted to show you, I'll quickly do before I run out of time. And this is just another great tool. I just can't stop using it. SPFx Fast Serve, and it was created by Sergey. He has some really nice blog posts, how to step by step, how to install it, how to configure it. So if you happen to try to find it useful, just let him know, because I'm sure he will appreciate some feedback. If you find any issues, please let him know. So I'm using this on any project, but especially with library components, because the projects tend to grow unless you have multiple library components and start splitting things out. But projects can grow significantly, and you end up with a similar problem, which is the time it takes to build and test after you make a change. So what SPFx FastServe does is just magic, and you can have a change being tested on the browser half a second after you do it. So I'll just quickly, it's extremely simple to add to a project. So here, where am I? So oops, I'm on the library already. Okay, that's probably why the learner command didn't work initially. Yeah, so when I was showing, oh no, that was something else. It doesn't really matter. So it works, trust me. So I'm just going to my library now. All I need to do is SPFx FastServe. And in this case, everything worked fine. All I need to do now is npm install, which I want to now. And I'll just make things easier and do only one. So I'm going to do the same now to my solution. All done. And from here, I'm back to my demo2 folder where I have the learner setup. So I'll do again learner bootstrap. This is because I ran SPFx FastServe and it requires me to install modules on both projects. So I'm just going to do it through learner again. Just because it's simpler to do everywhere with one simple command. Okay, and now if all I need to do is, let me quickly show you. So the SPFx FastServe added some configurations to the project. One of the things, which is the important one we are going to use here is, and it's similar to both, he added some additional things to the serve command. They actually replaced the one I had with something different. And what you will see now is I do learner run serve. So I'm running serve on both commands, but this time using SPFx fast serve. Ooh. Okay, I have some issues with the ports apparently. Let me. Oops, not. So I had a command in that case for Windows, and I'm no longer running on Windows. I think we can still test it. Okay, I'll show you. I have the same setup here. Give me a second. So what you see here is I was playing last night with WSL because I got the latest Windows update and I just couldn't resist. And I was setting up WSL for SPFx development, and I may be messing up some things because my demo was tested on Windows, and I may need to do something different here. So what I'm going to do in this case is I have the exactly same setup here, but in Windows, and if I go learner run parallel serve, there's something playing up. Oh, it's still running. It's just taking some time. That's why I wanted to set up things in. Oh, sorry, my bad. I know what's going on. I need to run that command in PowerShell. There you go. If I try now, and okay, I'm definitely doing something wrong here, and okay, I think I have an issue with I was running multiple serves, and I think the ports just got locked. That's why I cannot run now. I have that happening to me a few weeks ago, and I think a similar thing just happened now. So you can see here, I just need to basically clear the ports. It's a shame I don't have time to troubleshoot that now. It's a command you can run to kill everything in Node, and then you can start again with clean ports. What SPFx fast serve does is once you hit save, it takes about half a second, sometimes even less than that, to recompile and trigger a refresh in the browser of your code. It's insanely fast, and if you have that running across the library component and the solution, and I'm really sorry I couldn't show you this working. The development experience is just so fast. You basically ignore that you are you don't need to have two instances of the two different windows running serve on the same on different projects like you had with npm link, and everything is just so much faster. So let me just finish up because I'm run out of time. So I have a few resources which we'll share as part of the presentation where you can read more. Also, don't forget, you can get 3 Oculus Quest. Sorry, I forgot the name. Go to that link to find more information. Also, if you have the opportunity, support who is helping us through these difficult times. In this case, International Medical Corps or United Way. And thank you very much. Feel free to provide feedback, please do, for me and also for the event. And if you have any questions, I'm happy